Application is what you have to do with these skills. It creates feedback. So when I do something, I get feedback on my performance. That's when I learn and apply. Pat, we've been young men. I thought my father was an idiot. He would tell me not to do things. Don't go to that party. Don't drink. Don't stay out too late. Don't drive the car after dark. All of this stuff that I was like, all right, old man. That's received wisdom, right? That's somebody just telling you what the right order of things are to do. But I stayed out all night. I got arrested. I crashed a car. I drank too much. I got in fist fights. All kinds of things that if I had just listened to my old man, I wouldn't do. But I'll tell you what else. I wouldn't do them again today because I've applied myself to the world and I've learned where the edges are.
Hello and welcome to the Optimal Agency Podcast. My name is Patrick Cummings, as always, joined by my friend John Gilson. Together with you, we are exploring the ideas of agency, diving deep to discover a set of guidelines on how each of us can best operate in the day-to-day to maximize our personal autonomy, professional freedom, and ultimately our positive impact on the world. Thank you so much for tuning into the show this week. How are you, John?
I'm a juggling monkey, Patrick.
Amazing. I can't wait to see that as we get into this episode. That's the whole thing. This is a podcast, but the entire time you're going to be juggling. So
that's right.
Every other week here on the show, we have a longer discussion on how we can own our lives by becoming optimal agents. That's what we're doing this episode. And then every other week, we do a shorter episode where we answer one of your questions. This week, we are talking about self-development as permanent wealth, what that means, why that is, and how we can strengthen it. And then we'll wrap up by looking forward to the new year and the specific elements or ingredients of agency that John and I are aiming to make better and stronger. Are you ready to dive into this conversation, sir?
Let's do it.
Self-development as permanent wealth. What does that mean? That's you sent me that note. I thought it was fantastic. What does it mean so that we can kind of dive into this conversation?
We have to start with the idea that most forms of wealth are impermanent. You can lose all of your money. You can lose your job. You can lose your partner. You can lose your home due to catastrophe or otherwise. You can even lose your health. But in the absence of a truly catastrophic injury, you cannot lose the things that you know how to do and the skills that you have that you can apply. And so you can think about that knowledge and those skills as ways to reclaim lost things. So I lose my wealth. My bank account goes to zero or even negative. I can use the things I know to start a business or to get a job to reclaim that wealth. My health takes a catastrophic turn. I break my leg when I'm out snowboarding and I start to lose muscle mass, all sorts of things. Well, I can lean on no pun intended, what I know to eat the right things, to strengthen the other parts of my body, to come back from that break as rapidly as possible. And so the thesis is really simple. You can lose anything but what you know and what you can do. And so as much as we invest in our wealth by saving our money or by taking time aside for developing our health and our relationships, we also need to develop our set of skills no matter where we are in life.
It's probably not the case given what we talk about here, and the folks who are listening to us are likely not in this boat, but it strikes me as an interesting thing to ask you about, which is, do you get the sense that most people are interested in self-development?
I think that there is a divide. On one side, we have people who are simply trying to get by and survive. You need a certain level of affluence and self-awareness to be interested in self-development. I imagine if you are not one of those people, you wouldn't be listening to this in any way, shape, or form. But I suspect that even those who are interested in self-development don't have a strong sense of how to go about it in a way that's balanced, and how to go about it in a way that covers all of the potential facets of self-development in a way that future-proofs you. And so, no, I don't think everyone's interested in self-development, but I do think everyone's interested in progress and more. And I will tell you, the biggest and fastest unlock, whether you're in poverty and just trying to get by, or whether you're affluent and trying to take that next step in your overall agency, self-development is the only path to that. And I think it's really smart to target that self-development and say, well, what area do I need it to occur in? Everybody needs to do two things, in my opinion. One is diversify their skills. So if you're the type of person who says, I'm useless with a hammer or a wrench, guess what skill I need you to go get? If you're the kind of person who says, don't put a spreadsheet in front of me, I don't do that, guess what kind of skill you need to develop? If you're the kind of person who says, I hate parties. They make me super nervous and awkward, and I never want to go to them again. And that's part of my self-conception or identity. Well, guess what skills you need to develop? Because your deficit is your path forward in a lot of cases. So diversify your skills, but also go deeper. Magnify your strengths. And we set this up as a false dichotomy, saying I need to do one or the other. Well, that's not true. You need to do both. If you are a slam bang podcast host, become a better one, right? If you are absolutely tremendous at being calm under pressure in life or death situations as a first responder or a member of our military, be better at it than you are. And if you can do both of those things, go deeper on your skills, get increasingly specialized and valuable skills at the same time that you diversify, you're going to future-proof yourself against that loss of anything.
Go one step further with what you're saying with the why diversify? Because I can also see the argument being made to say, okay, and you suck at spreadsheets, you hate parties, drop them entirely. Go to 0 parties, look at 0 spreadsheets, and instead double down on fill in the blank thing that you are in fact very good at. Why is part of and maybe it goes back to kind of what you started this with, is like a balanced approach at self-development. But why is that important? Why focus on weakness and not just simply double down on strengths in your mind?
Obsolescence. The more specific your strengths are, I know how to code in Java. The more prone they are to being no longer applicable. And, risking hyperbole, find me a buggy whip maker, right? Risking hyperbole, find me a blacksmith or a cooper. Technology moves faster than you do. And what will save you in those scenarios is new skills that are on the other side of the technological divide, combined with very general skills. I can speak, I can write, I can influence, I can get along, right? And so the point is, if you have a dearth of skills across a variety, you're inevitably going to run into a situation as an adult where that lack of skill is suboptimal, right? Let's imagine you have no idea how to swing a hammer, like we just did up here. You have 5 inches of rain in 24 hours and the roof starts leaking. All you can do is call someone else to help you. In the meantime, the water level in your kitchen is rising, right? And so your lack of skills and your lack of diversification of skills might be exposed through obsolescence, but it will also be exposed through essentially random and low probability events. Random low probability events will expose your lack of ability like nothing else. Right? It's not the things that happen every day that we're diversifying our skills against. You don't have to diversify in a calm and static world. You have to diversify in a world that has chaos in it. And I challenge anyone listening to this to not be able to recount a time when the chaos overwhelmed the order and their abilities were inadequate to the task.
It also makes me think about, this whole conversations around agency, and to your example of the leaking roof, it's when you need to rely on somebody else, when you can only fix this by calling somebody else, you are very literally handing over agency to somebody else, right? And so by diversifying our skill set, we can at least buffer ourselves against the immediate release of our agency, because I can't swing a hammer. I can't look at this spreadsheet with any sense of understanding, right? You have to immediately rely on somebody else to do it. That is handing over agency to somebody else.
And often you have to rely on not a social network of I know 7 carpenters and I have 7 phone calls I can make, even if I can't swing a hammer. If you haven't developed that aspect of your social competence, there's only 1 phone call you can make. It's through the yellow pages, and you have no idea if you can rely on the person on the other end of it. So I'd love to get into the areas of self-development.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
So the first is vocational. And when I say vocational, I mean skills that make you money. Okay, these are both the general skills, like we speak about, the ability to present, to speak, to write, to influence, and more specific skills. Can I analyze numbers? Can I sell? Can I code? Can I hire someone else? Can I come up with a business plan? Can I run the day-to-day operations of a 10-person business? Can I run the day-to-day operations of a 300-person business? Developing your vocational skills and your skills that make you money is where most people automatically go. I say develop your skills, and anyone who's been through education and then higher education says, great, I'm going to get another degree. I'm going to read another book. I'm going to watch another video. And I think that's useful, but I only think it's useful with vocational skills in the idea that you have both learned them and applied them. And we've all seen this. You know, the day you get your degree in XYZ, you probably actually don't know how to do nearly anything unless you've had concomitant experience doing that thing in an applied scenario that isn't sterile. And I think about my own career development pre-agency, let's say, and think about how did I get where I got from learning and then applying? It was very rarely in the context of a degree. And I want to give you a couple examples. The first is a company called the Whole Life Challenge. I had a friend call me at my consulting practice and say, essentially, I need help growing this online challenge. And I had very recently taken a course, an online course called Copy Hackers. Copy Hackers was how to write influential sales copy, essentially. And I said to the friend, how big's the email newsletter list for this company? He said, it's about 100,000 people. I said, how often do you email them? He said, I don't. And I had just taken this course. And I said, well, let me help you out here. I can
do better than none at all.
I can do better than none. Let me make you millions of dollars. And so I took what I knew and I began writing emails. I began writing Facebook and Google ad copy using straight up the playbook that I'd just learned. Well, it worked, but it didn't work perfectly. In other words, I had to change things. I had to alter. I had to iterate. And so as you're acquiring new skills, whether vocational or otherwise, learn them, apply them, do the after action to say, how did that go? What can I do better? And then we loop right back down and back to application. And in that way, we can spiral that forward. One of the other things that example of this is software as a service. So I learned the subscription model in software as a service, essentially X dollars per X period of time with X commitment. And I was running my consulting business on a straight retainer. So I was saying, Patrick, if you want 10 hours of my time, pay me for 10 hours, and I will essentially bleed down that time bank. When I applied SaaS learnings of recurring revenue to my consulting business, what that became is pay me X dollars per month for X months. So I divorced from time into a subscription model. It's a much more secure model. But if I hadn't taken what I'd learned and applied it to something else, it's useless. It's not that useful to know subscription models get you guaranteed income unless you actually take that next step. So with vocational skills, you do need to deepen and widen the skills you have that make you money. Okay, and you need to apply them. The second place that I want to see people do that same thing of diversification and amplification of current skills Build something or make something and don't do it for money. In other words, we get really tied up in the skills we're willing to dedicate to our paycheck, but relatively untied up in the other skills. And we gave the example of being able to swing a hammer or woodwork or weld, or the ability to mentor an at-risk kid, or to be on the board of a nonprofit. The reason for developing those skills isn't just that they give you an escape hatch if chaos enters your life. It's actually, to me, that they allow you to diversify your identity. And there's a lot of risk in the American way of life to our identity when we say, I am. When you go to a party, you ask somebody who they are. You tend to ask them what they do. They tend to respond with their career. What that means is that any subsequent threat to that career, I lost my job, right? I was downsized or I quit, immediately plunges you into a crisis of identity, which is terrible. I don't want you to be in this existential dilemma of, if I am not the owner of this business that just went bankrupt, who am I? I mean, you want to talk about 6 months of hell? There you go. What if you had a ready answer? What if you knew, well, I'm a hobbyist painter, and I'm a father, and I'm a member of the local board, and I am a contributor to my community, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so by getting skills and knowledge in areas that are essentially recreational, building or making something not for money, you diversify your identity. And you should probably sense a pattern here with self-development as permanent wealth. It's the things that future-proof you and make you unassailable. And I want your money to be unassailable. I want your self-conception of worth to be unassailable as well. And so we diversify there. The third area of skill development for permanent wealth is physical. Do you know how to train yourself? Do you understand the basics of cardiovascular conditioning? Do you understand the basics of building strength? Are you engaging in new sports and sports going deeper in the sports you already love and wider with new sports? And do you know how to do the same with nutrition? Do you know how to feed yourself? And so if I know how to train myself, if I know how to train my flexibility, my mobility, my cardiovascular capacity, my strength, I know how to feed myself, and I know how to play sport, I will get, on balance, healthier and healthier. But as we age, we tend to lose the ability to do specific things, right? And I'm sure this is some level of sacrilege, but for instance, I don't barbell snatch anymore. I've always had a very difficult time with hip mobility. And so I have a very difficult time keeping my torso upright. I've found the risk reward of trying to snatch a barbell just tilts too much towards risk and not enough towards reward. Well, if my only sport was Olympic lifting, that would be a problem, because that's half of the book, right? Yep. And so it helps that I mountain bike. It helps that I occasionally bodybuild. It helps that I can do a low bar back squat instead of a high bar back squat through the diversification of those skills. And so, again, we're future-proofing ourselves against the inability to play any given sport or pursue any specific modality of training. And, we see this a lot, Pat, in the gym. You see somebody come in from a distance running and only a distance running background with no mobility background, right? You get almost all slow twitch fiber. They can't jump. They're not explosive. They tend to be very, very tight. And at some point, that does risk injury. Well, if I can't run marathons anymore, what can I do? Right. I think we've all run into the nutritional diversification issue. You go on the road, you don't have the thing in the cabinet, you don't have the thing in the fridge. What do? Well, do you know what the next best alternative is? Do you know how to feed yourself when your macro and micro optimized diet isn't sitting in front of you? And so we optimize the physical in addition to the vocational and recreational. And then the fourth area of skills, and the last one that I'd love to see people develop, is their mental abilities. And I don't just mean things like IQ and processing speed, because those things are largely outside of your control. But your emotional affect your ability to maintain equanimity in the face of chaos, your ability to meet other people and express empathy and to truly feel compassion for them, your ability to know logic and to exercise it, your knowledge of the irrational ways in which we think, the self-serving biases that we all have. Do you know those things? Can you avoid those things? And so if I am emotionally regulated in a great way where I can express myself, where I can maintain equanimity, where I can interact with others, I have a whole new set of skills, even if I lose everything, right? I think about Stephen Hawking, who most people are probably familiar with who are listening to this, with the exception of maybe Newton and Einstein, the most influential physicist of all time, completely paralyzed I believe in his 20s from the neck down, and nonetheless had the mental skills developed to the point where he became and continued to be world famous and contributing to the scientific canon. If I lost everything except for my brain, do I have the ability to carry on and future-proof myself? So I've got these 4 areas, and I want to just kind of hit hard, Pat, on one more idea that I've talked about in application, but application is what you have to do with these skills. Okay? It creates feedback. So when I do something, I get feedback on my performance. That's when I learn and apply. And it's funny, we've all, Pat, we've been young men. Like, I thought my father was an idiot. Right? Because he would tell me not to do things. Don't go to that party. Don't drink. Right? Don't stay out too late. Don't drive the car after dark. All of this stuff that I was like, all right, old man. Right? And so that's received wisdom. Right? That's somebody just telling you what the right order of things are to do. But I stayed out all night. I got arrested. I crashed a car. I drank too much. Right? I got in fist fights. All kinds of things that if I had just listened to my old man, I wouldn't do. But I'll tell you what else. I wouldn't do them again today because I've applied myself to the world and I've learned where the edges are, And so I think it's funny in that aspect. But as you look at all of these skills, are you actively developing not the knowledge, but the application? Because knowledge is fraught in that it's incredibly context specific, and it doesn't take much knowledge for it to mean a lot. So for instance, we take rule number 1 of wealth: separate your time from your income. Cool. I know that. Well, did it make me any richer or freer or give me more agency? No. And it won't until you do what? Start to ask yourself how and why and what am I going to try and what's it going to teach me?
One of the things that, I thought about this first as you were talking about vocational, but I think it applies across the 4, which is when I've worked with folks, I've worked with a lot of coaches, right, on brand and building websites and all these things. And to a T, almost every single one of them were too scared to go into, let's just say Squarespace and mess around. Just like, nobody's going to see it. You're not going to break anything. Go try to build yourself a website. And it was like asking them to please go learn Chinese and go to Beijing, right? They were that like, oh, that's not what I do. I can't do that. And so I bring that up. I use that as the example just to ask the question, which is, I think a lot of times in building these skills, the resistance is the natural evolution of skills, which is you're gonna stink at the beginning. You're gonna be bad at all of these things, like woodworking. If and when I start, it's gonna be terrible for a good amount of time. And I think that's the resistance that people have to the development of these kinds of skills. It's a lot safer to say to what we talked about earlier, which is like, I'm really good at spreadsheets. I'm going to live in spreadsheets because I'm good at spreadsheets, right? And I can just, that cycle can continue.
It doesn't threaten my identity. Yeah.
It doesn't threaten me my identity, and it doesn't make me face failure. And so I want to just pose that as the question, which is how do we get past the need to be good at something first before we decide to invest time and energy and effort into that thing?
Yeah. And it's not enough to say, well, don't, right? Like, don't be scared of failure.
Right.
Okay. I'll tell you how I do it because I think it's incredibly personal. So the other night, and we're recording this on December 20th. The other night I went caroling in front of my neighbors. Okay. So I got in this gang of people of about 14 and we went and stood in front of our neighbor's house and we sang. Yeah. Now our sheet music consisted of no music and only words. And it was very, very religious in its tones, as most rural New Hampshire places are. Those carols weren't like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. It was more like Hark the Herald Angels Sing. And so I'm sitting here going, glow, right? Like trying to do this and I'm terrible. But there were 14 other people there being terrible too. My point is, can you find somebody else to suck at this with? Because that's a lot more fun, right? Agreed. If you can go learn to mountain bike with somebody else who's willing also to suck, you can suck together. And that removes almost all of the social stigma of sucking, because what are we actually scared of? We're scared someone else is going to judge us. Mm-hmm. Well, it's awfully hard to be judged if you're terrible too. So find a group. Find a group of people to go try this with. The second is probably more cognitive than it is useful in application. And I'm not going to be able to cite my source, but it's not me. Let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. If you want to make progress, you always have to take a step back first. And it really helps to understand that and to embrace that and say that's okay. If you want to become a mildly competent musician, you must first sacrifice time you would have spent doing something you were competent at. So that's step back one, right? Step back two, you're going to have to spend some money to get an instrument, probably, even if you get it used. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a step back in your wealth. So I've stepped back my time and I've stepped back my wealth. And now I have to step back my literal spending of time incompetence because I'm going to stink. So understand that's the price of progress. The price of progress is not a straight line. Progress is up and to the right, followed by down, followed by up and to the right, followed by down. If you want more of anything, there will be a price to pay. Another way to think about this is nothing is free. And so if nothing's free, I can start and say, okay, I'm going to have to challenge myself, my identity, to get into Squarespace and mess around and to know I'm not going to break anything and it's okay.
Last question is, you alluded to this a little bit towards the end of the skill sets there, which is this idea of knowledge for knowledge's sake and being careful not to just continue to fall down the rabbit hole or the trap of like, I'm going to read one more book. I'm going to take one more course. I'm going to sign up for a master's degree, whatever that might be. And at the same time, one of your examples that you used was, I took this copywriting course and that's what got me. So I'm just curious, like for you, what's the right balance between I'm going to go learn something and so that I can apply it versus am I just learning this so that I feel like I'm making progress, so I can kind of check that box off that I am developing my skill set. I imagine it's one-to-one, right? Like if you're going to take a copywriting course, do something with it almost immediately.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I mean, okay. Great question for me. And one of the things I think that has genuinely made me what I would consider successful enough is application always. Okay. So I'll tell you one more story that will probably illustrate this. I was in a front-end web design class because I didn't know what else to do with my life. I literally at that point had no concept what I should be doing. So I signed up for this class. It's $5,000 in tuition. Well, John, you had $5,000. Yes, I did. And I'm learning Java and CSS and HTML. And we get the assignment. The first time we get an assignment, it says, okay, build a basic website. Well, I built a basic website advertising my ability to be a business coach and offering seats at a seminar in Australia because I thought it was fun. And then I called our former distributor, or probably still our current distributor of, again, Faster Australia. I said, I'm doing this thing, send some people to this website. And I hooked it up to some payment software. And I woke up the next day to $18,000 in ticket orders for my seminar that didn't exist. And I went to the front end web design class literally the next night. And I told the instructor, I said, I'm sorry, I have to drop out. He said, you can't drop out. You're the best student. I said, yes, I am. And I made $18,000. So I've got to go. Sorry.
Yeah. I got to build a seminar.
I sold a seminar. I've got to go. And so I went because I had to develop the product that didn't exist. And then I had to go to Australia. And what I'm saying there is, if I'd never attempted the knowledge, I wouldn't have known how to build the site. But if I'd never immediately tried to apply it, and not just apply it, but apply it to practical ends. In other words, don't do the exercises in the book unless you have to for the grade. Think about, what will I do with this? If I know how to analyze data, what can I immediately apply it to? A business, right? A personal pursuit. What is it that this skill is going to get me? And can I try? And so what's the difference? It's that if I learn something just to learn it, it's ironic, I don't learn it. I don't learn it. If I pick up a book today and read about how to install solar panels, I can get every bit of thesis about how a transistor works, how a panel works, how to install the panel, how to make sure it all points south and is getting the appropriate number of ohms and watts using a voltage meter. And if you're an electrician, that was a whole bunch of bullshit. I'm sure it's not right. But, right, until I actually get up on the roof, it doesn't matter because I don't know anything yet. So if you are learning because you don't know what to do next, don't start with the master's degree. Start with the skill that you want. In other words, you probably don't need a master's degree in computer science. You probably need to know how to do low code, no code app building, and you probably just need to try it. And when you do, you start to see where that knowledge overlaps with knowledge you already have for a productive end.
We are going to wrap it up there. Thank you very much, John. That was fantastic and a great start to the new year. I think I didn't do that on purpose, but that was a great start to the new year conversation. We're going to get to our close. We're going to talk a little bit about what you and I individually are looking at and thinking about and looking forward to in 2024 as it relates to the rules and behaviors of agency. But first, if you have not yet, we invite you to take the HWT questionnaire. Head to optimalagency.co/HWT to get immediate access to this questionnaire. What is it? It's 60 questions across health, wealth, and time, those ingredients of agency that John and I talk about here all of the time. And it's designed to give you an honest assessment of where you currently stand across all three. And importantly, it'll also give you specific directed advice and resources for how to improve wherever you may be the weakest. Again, optimalagency.co/HWT to get that questionnaire. All right, my friend. I thought, again, beginning of the new year, good excuse rather, to just look ahead. What are you thinking about? What are you looking at? What are you hoping to make better in this pursuit of agency in this new year?
It's going to sound lofty, I think, my friend. I'm looking to
give it to me.
Double down on what we're doing here.
Cool.
And can you undouble down? What is that? I'm going to half down. That's
a great question. I don't know what the opposite of double down is. If I gambled, I might know, but I don't know.
I'm going to half down on things that reach smaller audiences. So I spend a lot of my time giving my knowledge to individual clients through my consulting practice and really just dealing with one person or a small group of people at a time. This is our opportunity with Optimal Agency to reach large groups of people and to potentially make large impacts at a time. And what I'm recognizing is that historically I have essentially under-leveraged. I've exchanged my time for money in a format that looks like 1-on-1 or 2-for-1. I'd like to start exchanging my output for money to some degree, but more for impact. And so I'm going to be looking at how can I move the pieces around the board to enable that in 2024. And I'll tell you, the hardest obstacle for me is going to be a really simple one, which we just talked about, which is you have to take a step back to take a step forward. And so I'm going to have to essentially put a little less money in the stock market. I'm going to have to earn a little less money in the balance immediately so that I can get the time to do what's next to create more content for Optimal. So that's 2024.
I love that. And just because we haven't talked about it in a little while, this whole project, it comes with this, I think we've jokingly called it an equation or an algorithm of increase your health, your wealth, and your time that will lead to an increase of agency. And when you have sufficient agency, you can have the impact on the world that you want to have, right? That's the full gamut of this argument that we're trying to make here. And I love that what you're saying right there, what you're focused on is the end of that equation, is the impact end of that equation. And we've talked about it before. Impact can be big, little, it's completely personal and personalized for the person. But until you have the agency you need, you don't get to the impact. We can hope that we have the impact that we want to have. But until you have the agency, you're not in a position to actually then go chase that impact. And I think what you're saying is wonderful. What you're saying is I've got myself to a place of agency where I can now point my energy, my attention, my focus, my resources towards what I think is the impact that I really want to have. And so obviously I'm excited for that. And I look forward to continuing this project with you so that we can do that.
Yeah, me too, man. It's going to be great. Thanks.
Awesome. I love that. For me, I think, I was looking at the list of rules and behaviors we've got. Two that I've been one that I have been working on, I would say for the last year since we really started this project, which is wealth rule number 2, make as much as you're able. I can say that I've successfully done that, not successfully done it. I've done it much better in the last year than I ever have. And so I'm coming out of one year in a better position than I ever have. And I think that this year going forward is a doubling down on that as well. And so that remains sort of my North Star, at least as it relates to these rules of agency, is to make as much as you're able. But at the same time, the thing that I realize that I am doing very poorly, and I've done poorly at it for the last 6 to 7 to 8 years, is to prioritize friendship and connection. And it's something that I really like coming out of 2023 into 24. I really don't want to put that on such a far back burner that I can barely even see it. And right, like I've got lots of excuses, right? With kids, work, trying to make as much as you're able, et cetera. But I think at the end of the day, those are all excuses. And I think I am worse off for my lack of prioritization of friendship and connection. And for whatever reason, I'm coming out of the year, I am so cognizant of it this year than I've ever been before. And I think it just means that it's just because it's gotten such a low priority. It's got so low effort on my part that it's just so blatantly obvious now.
Yeah.
And so those two rules to me are the keystones for me going into the new year. Make as much as you're able and prioritize friendship and connection, and not let those things be at odds with each other. Yeah. Which again is an excuse that I comfortably used for years to say like, well, I just can't, like I'm working too much, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, what if
and
they're
so finding
not,
the way to balance those two things?
What if they're not at odds with each other? In other words, what if friendship and connection is the thing that, so we use the word recreation. What's it made out of? Redo again and recreate, right? Start again. Make your energy levels higher and better, and so on and so forth. And one of the things that we hit on is the idea is not to spend more time working. It's to spend the time you're working more productively towards the end you're after. And so imagine that friendship enables you to bring better energy to when you do want to make money. Imagine that those friendships may result in opportunities to make money. And, I think we set up those false dichotomies in our head, this versus this. No, it's this and this. And I think that's why the rules are, and we've often joked, like, you only have to know 18 rules. Well, that's right. That's a lot of rules, but they work together in a way that's hard to fathom until you accept that they work together.
That leads to maybe a good question we can wrap this episode up with, which is, we just talked about HWT questionnaire. It gives you a sense of where you are across all these three. How would you advise somebody? Let's just assume they took the HWT, they got the score back. They're like, okay, I'm good here. I suck there. I'm okay there. looking ahead at the year, not knowing like, oh, the goal here isn't like, let's perfect 18 rules all at once and let alone the behaviors and the meta rules. But like, how would you advise somebody taking that score, looking at that as being as objective as a look at themselves in pursuit of their agency as we can get? Do you say like, pick one rule, pick one, ingredient here, whether it's health, wealth, or time, and spend 90 days doing this, spend 3 months doing just give me how would you think about that if you were in a position of having just gotten the HWT score and looking out of these rules, looking out of this pursuit of agency? Like what is your prescription for the next year?
If you're coming at it for the first time, you're going to take the HWT questionnaire and you're going to get back a category in which you score most low. Okay? What I'd advise that you do is pick 2 rules from that category, and you'll know which ones. You'll know not only from your score, but frankly, intuitively, what are the 2 things here I really need to work on? So let's say you score lowest in time, and you need to learn to default to no, and you need to learn to limit recurring commitments, 2 of our rules. Let's say you score really low on the questions related to those, which you'll see in the email that we send. Okay, work on 2 things from what you score lowest in and pick 1 from another category, because I don't want you to get turned into a myopic calendar /no/ clock watching zombie. Yep. Pick something from health or pick something from wealth that maybe you're okay at and you want to get better. In other words, give yourself that psychological ballast of something where you're going to win and you're going to win. And I think the power of the HWT isn't in what you do after you take it. I think it's in the consciousness that is raised when you get the result.
Yep.
Right? Because if you can become conscious of where you could improve to get towards agency, and you simply keep that in mind, your actions will begin to reflect that that's important to you. So allow it to raise your consciousness. If that's a little too esoteric, 2 rules from the category where you're weakest, 1 where you're not. You can do it all year. You can do it for 90 days. The time frame's not important. It's that you have that consciousness and you're trying to apply it.
And to our earlier conversation, the application is the point. It's not enough to get the score and say, yeah, I knew that. It's have a plan, put a plan in place, learn from that plan, revise the plan, continue on.
Yeah, and never be scared to do new things.
That's right. Love that. Okay. Thank you, my friend. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. Thank you for your ratings and your reviews. Thank you for your questions. optimalagency.co/questions. If you would like to drop us a question for a future episode, John and I will be back next week for another episode of Optimal Agency.